He thought it was freedom. That was what Matthew Harrison told himself the day he broke up with Chloe, convinced by his mother's cold, elegant voice. She's cheating on you. She only wants you for your money. He didn't verify anything. He didn't listen to her. He just let her go. 5 months later, in the most exclusive restaurant in the city, Matthew was glancing over a contract without actually reading it. The laughter of executives, the clinking of glasses, and expensive perfume floated in the air until the glass door opened. And then he saw her. Chloe, walking in with a firm step, an elegant dress, her hair pulled up, and a pregnancy impossible to ignore. The entire room fell silent. Matthew felt the floor move beneath his feet. He didn't even breathe. Because it was in that second, only in that second, when he understood that the freedom he sought had a name, a face, and a mistake he could no longer hide. Before continuing with this story, comment from which country you are watching us. And don't forget to subscribe to Confessions of the Soul. Let's go back. The lie began like all dangerous lies, with a whisper wrapped in silk. Matthew's mother, Eleanor Harrison, a woman of sharp gaze and intimidating elegance, observed him from across the room, sitting in her blue velvet armchair, holding her phone as if it were a sacred Bible. Her face was rigid, as if she carried the worst news in the world, but deep in her eyes shone something darker, something calculated. "Son," she said with a broken voice, "I don't know how to tell you this, but I think you need to see what I found." Matthew left the folder he was reviewing. Lately, he was distracted, tired, and trusted his mother's judgments too much. He walked toward her, worried, because Eleanor only used that tone when she wanted to manipulate him. "What happened? Are you okay?" he asked, sitting beside her. Eleanor took a breath as if she were about to faint. She touched her forehead, exaggerating the tremor. "It's Chloe," she whispered, as if the word burned her tongue. Matthew felt a knot in his stomach. What about Chloe? The mother turned the phone screen. There were messages that seemed to be from Chloe, talking to another man, laughter, plans to meet, a "miss you" that pierced his chest, and a blurry photo taken from a strange angle. Matthew ran out of air. "This can't be," he murmured. But his voice no longer sounded firm. It sounded wounded. Eleanor seized the crack, put a hand on his shoulder, and feigned holding back tears. "I always suspected, son, but I didn't want to hurt you. You are too good, too noble. That woman, she only wants your money, and now that she saw she can't control you, she found someone else." The words "someone else" exploded in his chest. Matthew stopped breathing for a few seconds. He stood up, paced back and forth, feeling something dark grow inside him. Pride, ego, pain. "No, it can't be," he said, but with less and less conviction. Eleanor continued, an expert in poison. "Look into my eyes, Matthew. I am your mother. I would never lie to you about something like this. That woman was never for you. She was using you. You need someone at your level, not someone who betrays you behind your back." Her voice echoed in his mind, one blow after another. "Where did you find this?" he asked with a tight jaw. Eleanor looked down, feigning guilt. "I was checking the family cloud, and a backup of her phone appeared. I didn't want to see more, son. It hurts me." She covered her face as if crying, but behind her fingers, she was smiling. When Matthew read the messages again, he no longer saw inconsistencies or errors. He didn't look for anything out of place. He only saw what his pride wanted to see, a betrayal. At that moment, Chloe arrived at the apartment. She was coming from work, elegant as always, with that soft perfume, that filled the air every time she crossed the door. She smiled upon seeing him, without imagining the storm that was about to fall on her head. "Hey babe, I'm home. We need to talk about something important." But he didn't let her finish. "Who is he?" he spat, shoving the phone in her face. Chloe froze. "What? What is this? Matthew, those conversations aren't—" "Don't lie to me," he shouted, beside himself, pressing the phone against his chest. Eleanor, behind him, played her part to perfection. Agitated breathing, hand on her heart, a look of disappointment. Chloe took a step toward him, trying to touch his hand. "Let me explain, please. This is a misunderstanding. I don't want to hear you," he cut her off, cold as ice. His wounded pride, his mind clouded by his mother's influence, blinded him completely. "If you had something to tell me, it was before this." She felt the blow, but took a deep breath. "Matthew, it's not what you think. Please, look at me." "Get out of my house," he roared, pointing to the door. "If you wanted freedom, here it is. I don't need a woman who plays games with me." Chloe felt something break inside, but she didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't implore. She only lifted her head with dignity. "I never betrayed you. Someday, you're going to regret not listening to me." She took her things. She opened the door. And just as she left, behind her, where Matthew couldn't see, Eleanor smiled with absolute satisfaction, like someone winning a war she invented herself. It was the first sign that something was terribly wrong. But Matthew still didn't know that he had just destroyed the cleanest love he had ever had. And he didn't know the other truth Chloe carried inside, one that would explode in his face 5 months later. Chloe left Matthew's apartment with her back straight, but inside she felt something had broken beyond repair. She walked several blocks without realizing where she was going, her breath shaky and her heart pounding against her ribs as if trying to escape. She couldn't believe everything had ended like this, without explanations, without the right to speak, without a single chance to defend herself. That night she cried in silence. She didn't scream. She didn't despair. She just let the tears fall on the pillow while repeating the same phrase in her mind over and over. I didn't deserve this. And no, she didn't deserve it. But when dawn came, something inside her changed. She got up slowly, looked at her reflection in the mirror, and promised herself that she was not going to let a lie turn her into a broken woman. If Matthew had chosen to believe his mother, then she would choose to believe in herself. Thus began her rebirth. At work, Chloe became an unstoppable force. If she was good before, now she was brilliant. She immersed herself in projects, meetings, corporate trips, and high-impact presentations. Her ideas flowed as if the betrayal had opened a new part of her mind. In a matter of weeks, her company began to attract the attention of major investors. In 2 months, she appeared in a business magazine under the headline, Chloe Duarte, the woman redefining female leadership in America. People looked at her with admiration. Clients sought her out. Colleagues respected her. She became a symbol of discipline, elegance, and strength. But inside, there were wounds that couldn't be seen. At night, when she got home and took off her heels, loneliness fell over her like a heavy blanket, not because she missed the relationship, but because of the injustice. It was hard to know she had been condemned for a crime she never committed. It was hard to know that the man she loved doubted her without asking a single thing. And it was even harder to know she had a new reason to fight. Because a few weeks after the breakup, while reviewing the results of a test she thought was routine, the doctor looked at her with a gentle smile. "Chloe, congratulations, you're pregnant." The word hit her like lightning in the middle of her chest. For a moment, She thought she hadn't heard right. Her world stopped. How long?" she asked with a shaky voice. "About 7 weeks," the doctor replied. 7 weeks. Exactly the time since Matthew turned his back on her. Chloe was speechless. Later, in the parking lot, she sat inside her car, put both hands on the steering wheel, and closed her eyes while the silence echoed around her. A tear rolled down her cheek, not of sadness, but of fear. Fear of doing it alone. Fear of failing. Fear that her son or daughter would one day add about a father who never listened to her. But then she took a deep breath, and something inside her affirmed itself. "I'm going to protect you," she whispered, placing a hand on her abdomen. "No matter what happens, I won't let anyone hurt you." That promise changed everything. Chloe made the biggest decision of her life, not to say anything to Matthew, not because she wanted to punish him, but because she knew his mother was capable of anything to destroy her. Eleanor Harrison would not see that baby. She wouldn't manipulate it. She wouldn't use it. She wouldn't stain it with her poison. So Chloe kept silent. She focused on her work, on building a safe environment, on preparing a stable future for her child. Her belly began to grow little by little, hidden under elegant dresses that disguised the new curves. And although her professional life shone brighter than ever, her nights remained charged with reflections that burned. How could he doubt me so fast? Why did he never listen to me? What did I do so wrong that it was so easy to believe a lie? That silent pain became part of her. It didn't slow her down. It hardened her. But fate always finds ways to move pieces that one believes are immobile. One afternoon, while Chloe was reviewing proposals to expand her company internationally, she received an unexpected email. It had no known sender. It only said, "Matthew doesn't know the truth, but I do," and carried an attachment. Chloe felt a chill run down her spine because she wasn't expecting anything. But what she was about to see would change the course of the coming months. Fate was opening the first crack, and Chloe had no idea who was behind it, nor that this truth would bring her face to face with Matthew again. But this time, she wouldn't be the one crying. Matthew had always believed that freedom was measured in comfortable silences, in nights without commitment, in decisions made without asking permission. And for years, his mother made sure to remind him that successful men don't need anyone to hold them back. So when Chloe walked out of his life, he tried to convince himself that he was returning to that supposed freedom he had desired so much. The first week after the breakup was emotional anesthesia. Outings with friends, impromptu meetings, endless dinners with women he barely remembered the next day. Fake laughs, empty toasts, conversations that always ended in the same thing: money, power, inflated egos. His mother watched him from afar, proud, as if Chloe's absence were a personal victory. "You look better, son," Eleanor would say during breakfast. "Lighter, more like yourself." Matthew would nod, but every time he tried to smile, he felt a hole in his chest, a hole that nothing filled. To hide it, he threw himself into the life he previously thought was exciting. He traveled to Aspen on a private jet with a group of executives. He drank more than he should. He spent money as if he wanted to prove he could live without looking back. And every new party was a desperate attempt not to think about her. But Chloe appeared in his mind at every unexpected moment. In the silence between songs, in the fuzzy reflection of a wine glass, in the scent of expensive perfume some woman wore, but which was never hers. One day, in a Manhattan nightclub, surrounded by strobe lights and music so loud it numbed his ears, a woman approached and smiled at him with too much intent. He feigned reciprocation, but when she rested her hand on his chest, Matthew felt a sting. Not of desire, but of rejection. Because it wasn't Chloe. Because no one was Chloe. That night, when he returned to his apartment, he took off his shirt and let it fall to the floor without energy. He poured himself a whiskey, but didn't even finish it. The silence of the place enveloped him like a heavy shadow. He looked around. The expensive furniture, the panoramic view, the minimalist sculptures chosen by decorators. Everything perfect. Everything empty. He collapsed onto the sofa and rubbed his face with both hands, as if wanting to tear off something that was choking him inside. Why do I keep thinking about her? Why can't I leave this behind? Why, if she betrayed me? But there was no real anger. There was only a pain he didn't know where to place. He tried to distract himself more. He signed up for a golf tournament in Pebble Beach. He bought a new car. He organized a private yacht party in the Hamptons. And although the photos on social media showed a man enjoying himself, in every image there was a revealing detail. His eyes never smiled. The nights became longer, the fatigue deeper, the loneliness louder. Eleanor, however, was delighted. Every time she saw Matthew leave the house well-dressed for some party, she smiled as if she had recovered her son from the arms of an imaginary enemy. "You're better this way, my love," she said, stroking his cheek. "That woman wasn't right for you." But Matthew no longer responded to those comments with the same certainty. He began to keep silent, to observe his mother with a discomfort that didn't exist before. He didn't know why, but something in him was starting to wake up. One Sunday, after a long night out, Matthew arrived home with the sun already high. He threw his keys on the table and, without taking off his shoes, fell onto the bed. He slept for few hours, and when he woke up, he felt a vacuum so large that he put his hand to his chest, believing something was wrong. It wasn't a heart attack. It was something else. It was conscience knocking at the door. It was the memory of Chloe entering without permission. He remembered how she talked about her projects with bright eyes, how she walked through the living room with a coffee in her hand and a notebook of ideas, how she looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching. He remembered her laugh and felt something inside break. "She was the only real thing in my life." The phrase pierced him like an arrow. He sat up in bed abruptly, breathing deeply, as if he had suddenly understood something he had ignored for months. It wasn't the parties that made him feel so lost. It wasn't the new women that left him empty. It wasn't the work. It was the absence of Chloe. It was the abrupt and cruel way he let her go. It was the doubt that now began to form, a doubt that would make him question everything. Because in the middle of that new anguish, a phrase hit his mind with a force that made his skin crawl. What if Chloe never betrayed me? The thought scared him, but not as much as the next one. What if the only person who deceived me was my own mother? That idea, small but dangerous, planted itself inside him like a seed, one that in a matter of weeks would grow to destroy everything he believed to be true. 5 months later, Matthew's life had taken the shape of an elegant, impeccable, and completely empty routine. No one noticed, because he knew how to hide the fatigue behind expensive suits and a polite smile. But inside, the silence accompanied him at all hours, like a reminder of something he never faced, what he had done to Chloe. That Friday, Eleanor insisted they go to lunch at the most exclusive restaurant in the financial district. It was one of those places where people spoke in whispers, the waiters moved like shadows, and the glasses sparkled as if they were part of the decor. Matthew accepted because denying his mother always ended in conflicts he didn't have the energy to face. He sat across from her, trying to listen, but Eleanor's voice resonated distantly, as if she were underwater. "Son, it really makes me happy to see you like this," she commented, while adjusting her napkin with millimetric perfection. "Calmer, more focused, more free." Matthew barely nodded. The word free was starting to feel like a constant mockery. Then, without any warning, the air of the place changed. The glass door opened, letting in a ray of light that cut through the room like a golden line. Some customers looked up out of curiosity, and suddenly, the silence became real. Chloe had just entered. But it wasn't the Chloe Matthew had let go with a broken heart. It wasn't the woman he imagined broken, crying because of him. No, the woman who crossed the entrance looked like she stepped off a cover. A navy blue dress that elegantly outlined her figure, her hair pulled into a perfect low bun, her posture firm, upright, confident, her gaze calm, and the detail that shattered Matthew inside. A rounded, undeniable, evident belly. Chloe was pregnant. The entire restaurant went silent. A woman stopped moving her knife. A waiter froze with a tray in his hand. Even the ambient music seemed to fade. Matthew felt as if his heart stopped for an instant. "No," he whispered, without being able to help it. Eleanor, seeing where her son was looking, also froze. The color left her face. "Matthew, tell me it's not what it looks like," she murmured with a thread of voice. But it was exactly what it looked like. Chloe advanced with the tranquility of someone who knew perfectly well who she was and what she was worth. Every step of hers seemed to mark a new heartbeat in Matthew's chest. Beats that hurt, as if tearing something inside. She didn't look for him. She didn't hesitate. She didn't stop. She simply walked toward a reserved table at the back, greeting the maitre d' politely. She looked beautiful. She looked fulfilled. She looked far from him, and that was what destroyed him most. Matthew stood up without realizing it. The chair scraped the floor, and several people turned to look at him. But he didn't notice. His body acted before his mind, as if the sight of a pregnant Chloe had activated an instinct he didn't know he had. Eleanor quickly grabbed his arm. "Sit down," she whispered urgently. "Don't make a scene. We don't know whose baby that is." "Mom?" Matthew spoke with a voice that wasn't his, a low, broken tone. "Shut up!" Eleanor opened her mouth, indignant, but closed it, seeing her son's expression. She had never seen him like this. Chloe arrived at her table. She calmly placed her hand on her belly, like someone protecting a treasure. And it was that gesture, only that, which made Matthew feel as if the floor opened beneath his feet. Because for the first time in months, a question hit him with violence. "Is that baby mine?" Chloe finally looked up. Their eyes met. There was no hatred in her, no sadness, no plea. There was something worse, indifference. And just as Matthew took a step toward her, not knowing what he was going to say, a man appeared behind Chloe and gently placed a hand on her back. Matthew felt the world break into pieces. Matthew left the restaurant with his heart racing, and an anguish he didn't know how to name. Seeing Chloe pregnant had shaken him in a way that no party, no trip, and no lie from Eleanor had achieved. He needed answers. He needed to know what had really happened. He needed to know if that child could be his. That same night, after hours of walking aimlessly, he made a decision he had avoided for months. Face the truth. The whole truth. Not the comfortable version. Not the version his mother constructed. The real one. He started with the basics, reviewing the messages Eleanor had shown him that night when everything broke. He opened his laptop. He connected the files, and he started comparing every line, every hour, every detail. At first glance, everything seemed the same, but when he forced himself to look calmly, he noticed things he hadn't wanted to see before. Details out of place, words that weren't typical of Chloe, phrases too short, errors in capitalization, verb tenses she never used. And something more disturbing. The screenshots had crop marks. Matthew felt a chill run down his spine. To confirm his suspicions, he called an old acquaintance, a digital security expert who worked for several tech companies. "I need you to review some files. It's urgent," he said with a tense voice. His contact agreed immediately. Hours passed, interminable hours. When the answer finally arrived, Matthew stood immobile, reading and rereading the same phrase over and over. The messages were edited. There is evident manipulation in the captures. They do not match the original metadata. Matthew dropped the phone. He felt a vacuum open in the center of his chest. Cold sweat, agitated breathing, the room spinning. The messages were fake. Everything Eleanor had shown, everything that had led him to kick Chloe out, was a carefully crafted lie. With trembling hands, he requested access to the automatic backups he kept unconsciously. He searched for older versions, hidden files, fragments recovered from the cloud. And there it was, the complete thread of the conversation, the original, the unedited. Chloe had said absolutely nothing of what Eleanor claimed. There was no other man, no dates, no betrayal, nothing. Chloe was innocent, completely innocent. Matthew felt a pressure in his chest, a pain that didn't come from the body, but from the soul. He remembered the way she looked at him that night, desperate because he wasn't listening. He remembered how he shoved her out with harsh words. He remembered the way he humiliated her, the way he condemned her without allowing her a single explanation. He covered his face with both hands. What did I do? My God, what did I do? The guilt pierced him like a knife. It was late, very late. But he needed final confirmation. That same night, he drove to his mother's house. He knocked on the door with force. Eleanor opened, surprised to see him so pale, so different. "Matthew, why are you coming at this hour? What a lack of—" "Did you edit the messages?" he asked bluntly. Eleanor froze. "What are you saying? Of course not. That woman was always—" "Answer me!" His voice boomed in the hallway. The silence became a confession. Eleanor looked away. She swallowed. She pressed her lips, and that was enough. Matthew felt something inside him being torn out by the roots. "Why?" he whispered, with a pain he didn't even know he could feel. "Why did you do this?" Eleanor lifted her chin, trying to regain control. "Because that woman wasn't for you. Because she was going to ruin you. Because you don't know how to choose. I only protected you." Matthew took a step back, horrified. She had destroyed everything. She had manipulated. She had lied. She had intervened in the most intimate thing he had. "You took away the woman I loved," he said in an icy murmur. "You made me believe she betrayed me, and now she might be expecting my child." Eleanor's expression changed. For the first time, real fear appeared on her face. "That baby doesn't have to be yours." Matthew closed his eyes tight. A sharp pain rose through his chest. His breath caught. When he opened them again, his gaze had changed forever. "Don't ever come near my life again," he said, with a calm that was colder than any scream. "From today, you no longer decide anything for me." And he left, leaving his mother with her mouth open, pale, defeated. But upon reaching the car, still with trembling hands, his phone vibrated. It was an unknown message. No name, no photo. Only one phrase. "There is something you need to discover about Chloe. She is not as alone as you think." Matthew felt the world turn. What would come next would be even more devastating. Matthew left the restaurant almost running, his heart pounding in his chest as if he had woken up after months of sleep. He had seen Chloe pregnant, radiant, confident, and accompanied. He couldn't leave without trying to talk to her, not after everything he had discovered. not after finally understanding the magnitude of his error. She was walking toward the private parking lot, holding a folder in her hands, without the slightest intention of stopping. Her firm posture, the sound of her heels, the way the wind moved the hem of her dress, everything about her seemed to remind Matthew of what he had lost. "Chloe, please," he said, approaching, but not daring to touch her. She stopped for barely a second, turned her head slowly. Their eyes met for an instant, but the coldness was immediate. "I have nothing to talk about with you," she replied with a firm voice, without harshness, but without a trace of softness. Matthew swallowed. The rejection hurt more than he had imagined. "Please listen to me. I need to tell you the truth. I didn't know what. I didn't understand what was happening. I was wrong. I swear that—" Chloe let out a very light laugh, without humor, without joy. "Now you want to understand?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "When I begged you to listen to me, you didn't want to. When I asked you for a minute to explain, you closed the door in my face. When your mother invented whatever she wanted, you just nodded." Matthew felt his throat tighten. He wanted to respond, but she didn't finish. "You can't come now trying to fix something you destroyed yourself." He took a step toward her. "Chloe, I didn't know the messages were fake. Everything my mother said seemed so real. I thought—" She lifted her hand, cutting off his words. "That's the problem, Matthew. You didn't think. You only believed what was convenient for you. You only listened to the person who always manipulated you. You never gave me the chance to speak." Matthew breathed deeply, fighting against the tears he didn't want to show in public. "I know, and it hurts me. I am regretful. You can't imagine how much." Chloe held his gaze for a second, and that second was devastating, because in her eyes there was no hatred. There was disappointment, a disappointment so deep it was almost irreparable. "Regret doesn't erase wounds," she said, adjusting her hand over her belly, "and I no longer live in that place where I was waiting for you." Matthew looked at her belly, and the air escaped his body. "Chloe, I need to know. That baby—" She hardened her expression. "This baby is fine. That is the only thing that matters." "Is it mine?" he asked with a broken voice. Chloe looked down for an instant. Then she looked at him again, with a calm that destroyed him even more. "Matthew, this baby doesn't need a man who doubts his mother. He needs stability, and I'm going to give it to him." He felt as if the floor opened up under his feet. "Please," he whispered, "don't say that. If it's mine, I have a right to know." "You lost that right the day you kicked me out without listening to me," she replied without raising her voice. A tear escaped her eye without her being able to prevent it. "Chloe, I beg you, tell me the truth." She breathed deeply. Her gaze softened just for a fraction of a second, a fleeting memory of what they had once been, but it disappeared immediately. "The truth," she said, turning her face toward the parking exit, "is that you are no longer part of my life." And she started walking. Matthew wanted to go after her, wanted to grab her, ask for forgiveness 1,000 times, fall on his knees if necessary, but his legs didn't respond. He stayed frozen, watching her walk away, each step of hers being a blow to his chest. When she got into the car that was waiting for her, Matthew finally woke up from his paralysis. "Chloe, please!" he shouted. But the door had already closed. The vehicle pulled away slowly. Matthew stayed there, standing, with his hands in his hair and his breath cut, while the world passed around him as if nothing had happened. Until his phone vibrated, a message from the same unknown number. Matthew opened it with trembling fingers. "If you want the truth about that baby, you're not going to find it talking to her. There is someone else in this story." Matthew felt a chill run down his spine. Someone else was involved. Someone he had never considered. And that truth was about to explode. Matthew drove without thinking, with his hands trembling on the wheel and his vision clouded by a mix of rage, guilt, and despair. The city lights passed like blurry spots, but he saw nothing. He only heard Chloe's voice, telling him that he had doubted her, that he had left her alone, that she was no longer part of his life. He stopped in front of his mother's mansion. He got out of the car so fast he almost tripped. He knocked on the door with a force that echoed through the entire entrance. Eleanor opened, confused, wrapped in a silk robe, with her hair perfectly arranged, as if even in sleep she needed to maintain an impeccable image. "Matthew, what are you doing here at this hour? You're scaring me." "I need the truth," he interrupted, entering without permission. Eleanor closed the door slowly, looking at her son with a mix of nervousness and irritation. "What's wrong with you? Why do you come in so agitated? I hope it's not because of that what—" "Don't say her name," he spat with a hardness that left her immobile. "Not until you tell me the full truth." Silence fell between them like a wall. Matthew threw onto the table the printed documents, the recovered captures, the digital analyses that proved the manipulation. "Explain this to me," he said, pointing at everything. "I already know the messages were fake. I know they were edited. I know it was you." Eleanor turned visibly pale. "Matthew, son, listen to me. I only wanted to protect you. That woman wasn't for you. You don't understand how they are. You didn't protect me," he shouted, hitting the table so hard she jumped. "You destroyed me. You ruined the only real relationship I had in my life." She pressed her lips together. "I know what is best for you. That woman was going to sink you. She was going to take everything. I couldn't let— Chloe never wanted to take anything from me," he interrupted with eyes shining with rage. "Never. She treated you with respect, with affection, and you did everything to get her out of my life." Eleanor lifted her chin with her usual arrogance. "Because she doesn't belong to our world. She wasn't good enough. I built your name, your position, your future. I won't allow a woman like her." Matthew laughed, but a hollow, broken laugh. "A woman like her," he repeated, taking a step toward his mother. "Mom, Chloe is expecting a child." Eleanor was speechless, literally speechless. "What? What did you say?" "You heard right," he continued with his voice cracking. "Chloe is pregnant, and if that baby is mine, you kept me away from him. You made me abandon both of them." Eleanor opened and closed her mouth several times, seeking a response that didn't come. "You can't know if that child—" "Shut up!" Matthew roared so loud that even Eleanor herself cringed. "Don't ever insinuate anything about her again, not after what you did." Eleanor tried to approach, but he took a step back. "Son, understand. I did what I thought was right. Everything I have, everything you have, is thanks to my decisions. Can't you—" Matthew lifted his hand. "From today, you decide nothing. Not in my life, not in my company, not in my future." Eleanor frowned, horrified. "What are you saying?" "That you're out," he responded without hesitating. "Tomorrow, the board of directors will be changed. You will no longer have access to anything." Eleanor took a step back, as if she had received a slap. "Matthew, please, you're exaggerating. I'm your mother." "A mother doesn't destroy her son's life to maintain control," he said with a calm that hurt. "A mother doesn't lie, doesn't manipulate, doesn't poison what he loves. You are not my mother at this moment. You are the reason I lost everything." Eleanor tried to speak, but she collapsed in silence. Matthew breathed deeply. "Goodbye, Mom." and he left the house without looking back. During the following weeks, Matthew did the unthinkable. He disappeared from his social life, canceled meetings, avoided parties, stopped traveling, and ignored invitations he previously considered essential. He sought professional help. For the first time in his life, he talked about his fears, the pressure from his mother, the weight of guilt, and his inability to trust. Each therapy session was painful, but necessary. He stopped drinking, stopped going out with strangers. He began to sleep without pills, began to read, to cook, to breathe without feeling that the world was coming down on him. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could alleviate the wound of having lost Chloe. It was a silent pain, the kind felt upon waking, when the room is dark and the mind hasn't yet remembered what hurts. Until it remembers. Every day he thought about her. Every night he imagined how everything would have been if he had listened to her, if he had been brave, if he hadn't allowed Eleanor to destroy what they had. Guilt was a constant fire, and it was just when he was beginning to rebuild himself that fate struck again. One afternoon, leaving therapy, his phone rang. Unknown number. "Yes," he responded, tired. A male voice spoke on the other end, cutting, direct. "Mr. Harrison, it's about Chloe. You need to come to the hospital. It's urgent." Matthew felt his heart stop, and then everything began to fall apart again. The hotel ballroom was full of business people, well-known figures, flashes, quick conversations, and wine glasses. It was one of the most important financial sector events of the year, and Chloe, as the new revelation of the corporate world, had been invited as a main panelist. Her name appeared on all the programs, alongside other prestigious executives. She looked impeccable. An elegant dress, hair perfectly up, a confidence that illuminated her presence. But inside, she was exhausted. Too much work, too much pressure, and above all, too much emotional weight carried alone. Matthew had been invited too, though he didn't plan to attend. But when he received the call from the hospital hours earlier, alerting him that Chloe had been there, his world had turned upside down. He couldn't rest. He couldn't think of anything else. So, driven by something he couldn't explain, he decided to go to the event just to make sure she was okay. When he saw her walk onto the stage, a mix of pride and anguish stunned him. Chloe spoke fluently, with passion, with that intelligence that had always hypnotized him. But something about her wasn't right. Her hands trembled slightly. Her breathing seemed faster than normal, and every now and then she brought her hand to her belly as if she needed to remind herself to stay firm. Matthew took an involuntary step forward. His heart was in his throat. The interview progressed, the applause multiplied, until suddenly, while answering a question about leadership, Chloe went silent. The audience thought it was part of the speech, but Matthew felt it immediately. She wavered, blinked several times. The color drained from her face, and before anyone could react, Chloe leaned to one side, losing her balance. Matthew ran as if the world depended on it. He reached the stage just in time to catch her before her head hit the floor. "Chloe, look at me," he whispered desperately. "I'm here. Breathe, please, breathe." The murmur of the audience turned into chaos. Photographers approached, organizers shouted instructions. An ambulance was called, but Matthew heard nothing. He only felt her irregular breathing, her weak body, the weight of knowing that something was very wrong. "It's okay, I've got you," he said, holding her against his chest, while carefully lowering her from the stage. When the paramedics arrived, he didn't let go. He insisted on getting into the ambulance. He held her hand throughout the entire journey, murmuring words that maybe she couldn't hear. "Forgive me. For everything. Don't let yourself fall, please. Not like this. Not now." At the hospital, minutes turned into hours. Finally, the doctor came out. "Mr. Harrison," he said, recognizing his last name. "The patient is stable for the moment, but the stress level is extremely high. That can affect the baby. She needs absolute rest. No burdens, no emotional pressure." Matthew felt something inside him collapse. He put his hands to his face, breathing with difficulty. It was as if his own heart were breaking. "Is the baby okay?" he asked. "For now, yes," responded the doctor, "but he won't survive if she continues like this." The blow was dry, mortal, unstoppable. Matthew walked toward the room where she was resting. He saw her asleep, pale, with a blanket covering her belly. He sat by her side. He took her hand with a delicacy almost irreverent, as if fearing she would break. And there he stayed. Hours, whole hours without moving, without eating, without drinking, just looking at her. A nurse approached. "Sir, do you need anything?" "Just for her to wake up," he responded with a voice so low it was barely heard. Near dawn, Chloe opened her eyes slowly, blinked, confused, saw the ceiling, then the window, and finally saw him. Matthew, with his head resting on the mattress, holding her hand, asleep from pure exhaustion. Chloe looked at him for a long time, and something in her expression broke. A flash of fragility, a memory, a feeling she had tried to bury, but she said nothing. She closed her eyes again, and although she didn't want to admit it, a part of her felt less alone. Matthew woke up seconds later, feeling her movement. "Chloe," he whispered, leaning in. "Thank God." She didn't respond, but she didn't withdraw her hand. And that small gesture was enough to ignite all the hopes he had buried. What neither of them knew was that outside the room, someone was watching them. Someone not willing to allow that story to end well. When Chloe opened her eyes that morning, the hospital room was silent, bathed in a soft light entering through the half-open curtain. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then she felt something warm, firm, immobile, and looked down to find Matthew's hand holding hers. He was sitting in an uncomfortable chair, leaning forward, with his head resting on the edge of the bed. He looked exhausted, with a bit of a beard growth and deep dark circles, but he hadn't let go of her hand for even a second. It was as if his whole body had decided that this was his place, and he wouldn't move from there until she woke up. Chloe observed him for a long time in silence, and something deep inside her moved. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't just sadness or missing the past. It was something deeper, the recognition that, despite everything, this man was there, without demands, without wanting to control anything, without demanding to be heard, just present. When she tried to move her hand, he woke up immediately, as if he had been alert all that time, even though his eyes were closed. Matthew said with a sigh of relief that almost broke his voice. "Thank God. How do you feel? Does anything hurt? Do you need water? Do you want me to call the doctor?" She lifted her free hand, asking for silence with a gentle gesture. Matthew went quiet instantly. "I'm okay," she responded with a neutral, controlled tone, not giving away more than necessary. "You have no idea how worried I was," he murmured, taking a breath as if he had been hours without breathing. I thought something worse had happened to you." Chloe looked elsewhere, not knowing what to do with that naked vulnerability of his. She wasn't used to seeing Matthew like this, disarmed. He then stood up slowly, as if fearing making too much noise. "I'm going to be here, every day, whenever you need me. Not just for you, but for the baby. And I'm not going to ask you for anything. I'm not going to pressure you. Just let me help you." Chloe didn't respond, but she didn't push him away either. And sometimes, silence is already a door that opens a tiny bit. During the following days, Matthew did exactly what he promised. He arrived early. He brought decent, hot food made with care. He helped her get up and walk through the hallway. He accompanied her to appointments. He spoke with the doctors. He took care of paperwork. He paid bills without announcing it, without boasting, without throwing it in her face. And most importantly, he never touched on the subject of getting back together. He never played the victim. He never demanded forgiveness. He never said, "You have to," "You should," or "It's about time." He was a silent, constant presence, and profoundly different from the Matthew she had known before. Chloe, from her bed, observed everything without knowing how to process it. Because what she saw in him didn't seem like theater. It wasn't a desperate performance to get her back. It didn't feel like those empty promises he had made her before. It felt real. And yet, fear still lived inside her. The fear of believing, the fear of lowering her guard, the fear of being hurt in the same place again. One afternoon, while he was arranging some withered flowers on the side table, Chloe said suddenly, without looking at him directly, "I don't know if I can trust you." Matthew stopped. He took a deep breath before answering. "You don't have to do it now," he responded with sincerity, without drama. "Trust isn't demanded, it's demonstrated. And I plan to demonstrate it to you every day, even if you don't want me by your side. I'm not leaving." Chloe looked down at her hands, at the curve of her belly, and that was the first real crack in the future she had built around her heart. The following days were like a slow rebirth. Short, but sincere conversations. Silences that no longer hurt so much. Small gestures. An unexpected peace that seeped through the smell of disinfectant and the sound of monitors. Until, in a silent early morning, everything changed. Chloe woke up with a strong, deep pain that pierced her belly like a hot wave. Instinctively, she held her stomach with both hands. "Matthew!" she called him, trying to sit up. He jumped from the armchair in a second, still half asleep but totally alert. "What's wrong? Does it hurt? Is it—" "I think it's time," she responded, breathing fast, trying to control the panic and anxiety. Matthew felt his heart want to leap out of his chest. He shouted for help. The doctors arrived. The nurses began to prepare everything with quick, sure movements. And when they began to push the gurney toward the delivery area, Chloe reached her hand back, searching for something, searching for someone, searching for him. "Don't let go of me," she whispered, with eyes full of fear and determination at the same time. Matthew took her hand with force. "Never again," he responded like a vow. The labor was intense, painful, long. Chloe squeezed Matthew's hand as if the whole world depended on that contact. And he, although his body was trembling, didn't let go for a single second. "Breathe, my love. Breathe," he murmured in her ear, without even realizing he had said "my love." Chloe, exhausted, sweating, with tears mixed with pain and fear, could barely respond between gasps. "Don't let me fall. Ever," he whispered with a broken voice. "I'm here with you." Hours later, a strong cry filled the room. The baby had been born. Tiny, pink, beautiful, with the same dark eyes as Matthew. A perfect copy. Matthew saw the child and collapsed. Literally. His legs didn't hold him. Tears came out as if a dam had opened inside him. He covered his face with one hand, while the other remained clung to the bed. My God, It's my son. Chloe, forgive me. Forgive me for everything I did to you, for not believing you, for abandoning you, for failing you, for not being the man you deserved. His crying was real, raw, irreversible. There were no excuses. There was no justification. Only guilt and a love that arrived late. But it arrived. Chloe also cried, but not out of sadness. It was a cry of relief, of liberation, the end of a cycle of pain, the beginning of something else, something she never imagined she would have the strength to live again. A nurse settled the baby carefully and left him in Chloe's arms. Matthew approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe too loud and ruin that moment. "Can I?" he asked in a low voice, looking at the baby as if he were a fragile miracle. Chloe nodded slowly. Matthew stroked the child's head with trembling fingers, like one touching something sacred. In that moment, the past stopped mattering so much. The lies didn't matter. The fall didn't matter. It didn't matter how many times they had hurt each other. There only existed that instant, the three of them together, being reborn. Days later, when they finally discharged her, Chloe and Matthew walked slowly toward the hospital car. The air outside seemed different, as if the world had changed a little along with them. They weren't a couple. They weren't strangers. They were something new, something fragile, something true. Chloe took a deep breath, settling the baby who slept in her arms. "I don't know where we're going, Matthew," she said with honesty, without embellishments. "But I want to walk slowly. I want to try, maybe, carefully, with small steps." Matthew smiled with shining eyes. "Small steps are the ones that go the furthest," he responded, with a tenderness he didn't have before. She looked at him with a heart full of fear and hope. "Just don't fail me again." "I won't," he whispered. "I swear it by my son." "And by you." Chloe lowered her face, moved, letting a solitary tear slide down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of defeat, but of someone allowing herself for the first time in a long time to believe in a maybe. And so, without haste, without empty promises, they began to walk toward a new life. A life built not on pretty words, but on truth. Sometimes, as a voice that narrates broken lives and deep rebirths would say, sometimes losing everything is the only way to understand what really counts. Sometimes fate collapses what you thought was your world, only to teach you how to love better, because true love isn't perfect. Rebirth.